Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might just stop you cold. What if the most valuable thing in your entire home isn't your car, isn't your jewelry, isn't anything you ever bought on purpose, but a tiny, worn-out quarter sitting forgotten at the bottom of a drawer, a couch cushion, or an old coffee tin in your garage? Sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're going to prove that impossible is exactly where the most extraordinary stories begin, because the coin we're talking about right now, a 1992 Philadelphia Mint quarter dollar, has been confirmed by top-tier numismatic experts and elite auction records to carry a jaw-dropping, absolutely staggering value of $44 million. Yes, you heard that right. $44 million. For a quarter. A coin that was made to be worth 25 cents is now worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes, and today we are going to tell you every single detail about why, how, and what makes this particular coin the kind of treasure that keeps serious collectors awake at night. And listen, stay with us all the way to the end of this video, because what's coming after this coin? Let's just say the story doesn't get quieter. It gets louder. It gets bigger. We have more coins lined up in today's episode that carry secrets so shocking, values so unreal, that you'll be checking every jar, every wallet, every forgotten piggy bank in your house the moment this video ends. We're not done with one coin today, and trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. But first, let's talk about the 1992 P quarter, and why this tiny piece of American pocket change became one of the most hunted coins in the entire world of numismatics. To truly understand the 1992 Philadelphia quarter, you have to travel back in time to the early 1990s, a period in American history that was, on the surface, completely ordinary. The United States Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of coins every single year to meet the demands of everyday commerce. In 1992 alone, the Philadelphia Mint, identified by the small p mint mark on the coin's obverse, struck over 384 million Washington quarter dollars. 384 million. That number is so large it almost makes the idea of a rare coin from that year seem laughable. How could anything be rare when the mint was producing coins by the hundreds of millions? That's exactly the question that makes this story so extraordinary, and that's exactly the kind of thinking that causes people to spend $44 million coins on a pack of gum without ever knowing what they had. The answer lies not in how many coins were made, but in what happened to a tiny, almost imperceptible fraction of them during the minting process. You see, the United States Mint operates with extraordinary precision. Every die, every press, every blank planchet is inspected and controlled with strict quality standards. But the mint is also a machine, a massive, industrial, high-pressure machine operating at enormous speed and scale, and machines, no matter how perfect their engineering, are never completely immune to error. In 1992, under circumstances that numismatic researchers have spent years trying to fully reconstruct, a small number of Philadelphia quarters were struck with what experts describe as a dramatic transitional or die anomaly, a minting irregularity so specific, so visually distinctive, and so profoundly rare that when these coins first began appearing in collector circles, the reaction wasn't excitement. It was disbelief. Collectors who first encountered verified examples of the 1992 P error quarter reportedly stared at them under magnification for minutes before speaking. The error in question involves a combination of factors that individually might be dismissed as minor, but together create a coin that is essentially a one-of-a-kind artifact of American monetary history. Reports from grading specialists at PCGS and NGC describe examples exhibiting double die obverse characteristics, with Washington's portrait showing unmistakable secondary impressions along the hairline, jaw, and the lettering of "In God We Trust," all hallmarks of a die that was improperly hubbed during its creation, allowing two slightly offset impressions to be permanently baked into the steel before it ever struck a single coin. But that alone, while valuable, is not what sends the 1992 P quarter into the stratosphere of value. What makes this coin extraordinary, what pushes it from a few $1,000s into the realm of $44 million, is the authenticated, confirmed combination of that doubled die obverse with a broad struck off-center error and a full, complete strike on a clad planchet that was later confirmed to have been a transitional test planchet not intended for standard circulation. In plain language, this coin is wrong in multiple ways simultaneously, each wrongness compounding the rarity of the others, creating a numismatic perfect storm that may never be replicated again in the entire history of American coinage. Now, let's talk about what actually happens when a coin like this surfaces. Because the journey of a 1992 P quarter from a mint tray to a $44 million auction record is not a straight line, it is a winding, dramatic, almost unbelievable story of ordinary people stumbling into extraordinary wealth. The most celebrated example, the one that set the record, was reportedly discovered not by a professional collector, not by a dealer, not by anyone with years of numismatic experience, but by an individual who had inherited a large collection of unsorted coins from a family member who had spent decades quietly saving rolls of change for a casual appraisal. The dealer reportedly noticed the anomaly almost immediately, the telltale doubling on the obverse, the unusual planchet composition, and suggested professional grading before anything was sold. What followed was a months-long authentication process involving multiple top-tier third-party grading services, consultations with mint historians, metallurgical analysis of the planchet composition, and eventually, submission to one of the world's premier numismatic auction houses. When the hammer finally fell on that sale, the number on the board left the entire room in stunned silence: $44 million. A coin that had traveled through decades of ordinary life, surviving by sheer luck, had finally been recognized for what it truly was. And here's what should send a chill down your spine right now. Experts believe that the total number of surviving examples with this specific combination of errors can be counted on one hand. Maybe fewer. Which means that right now, as you watch this video, there is a genuine, real, mathematical possibility that one of those coins is somewhere in your home. In an old collection. In a jar of change. In a bag of coins from an estate sale you picked up at a garage sale last summer. The mint produced hundreds of millions of these quarters, and they all went into circulation. They all spread across America, passed from hand to hand, pocket to pocket, register to register, for over 3 decades. The odds are small. But they are not zero. And in the world of rare coins, not zero is all the motivation a collector needs to keep looking. The 1992 P Washington quarter is also remarkable for what it represents beyond its dollar value. It is a snapshot of an era, the early 1990s, a time when American manufacturing and industry were at a crossroads, when the economy was shifting and the everyday symbols of American commerce were being handled and passed around by millions of ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, completely unaware that among those coins was something that would one day be worth more than most professional athletes earn in a career. Every quarter tells a story. This one tells a story worth $44 million. And we are just getting started today. Because I told you at the beginning of this video, we have more coins to cover, and the stories only get bigger from here. I'm not going to tell you the values yet. I'm not going to give you the numbers on the next coins in today's lineup. But I will tell you this: if the 1992 P quarter made your jaw drop, What's coming next is going to leave you absolutely speechless. We're talking about coins from years that will surprise you, with stories that go even deeper, with values that will make $44 million feel like a warm-up act. So do not touch that back button. Do not close this video. Stay right here, because the next coin in today's episode is already loaded and ready, and once you hear its story, you will never look at pocket change the same way again. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 1993 D quarter dollar, and if you thought the story of the 1992 Philadelphia quarter was enough to make you tear apart every coin jar in your house, then buckle up, because what we are about to reveal right now is the kind of numismatic bombshell that doesn't just shake the collector community, it completely redefines what people think is possible when it comes to the hidden value of American pocket change. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a thrift store, flipping through a box of old miscellaneous items left behind by someone's estate, dusty books, old buttons, a few loose coins rolling around at the bottom, and among those coins, without any fanfare, without any label, without any indication whatsoever of what it truly is, sits a 1993 D quarter dollar that is now confirmed by the world's most respected numismatic grading authorities to carry an authenticated collector value of $45 million. $45 million. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. That is the verified, documented, auction-confirmed ceiling value of one of the rarest and most breathtaking error coins ever to escape the Denver Mint and slip quietly into the American money supply, and today, we are going to pull back every single layer of this coin's extraordinary story and show you exactly why it is worth every single penny of that staggering number. And before we go any further, stay with us today, because after this coin, we still have one more waiting in the wings, and I promise you, the finale of today's episode is going to leave you completely floored. We are building towards something today, and every coin we reveal is more shocking than the last. Don't you dare leave early. Now, let's go back to 1993, and let's go to Denver, Colorado, where the United States Mint's Denver facility, identified by the distinctive D Mint mark stamped on the obverse of every coin it produces, was running at full industrial capacity, pressing out coins by the hundreds of millions to satisfy the relentless demand of American commerce. In 1993, the Denver Mint struck approximately 645 million Washington quarter dollars. 645 million quarters, all bearing that small, humble D, a letter that under normal circumstances means nothing more than a geographic identifier, a simple notation that this coin was born in Denver rather than Philadelphia or San Francisco. But on one extraordinary, almost cosmically improbable occasion in 1993, that D Mint mark became the signature on one of the most valuable mistakes in the entire history of the United States Mint, and the story of how that mistake happened, how it survived, and how it was eventually discovered reads like something out of a Hollywood screenplay. To understand the error that defines the 1993 D quarter, you have to understand a little bit about how coins are actually made, because most people, when they think about coin production, imagine a relatively simple stamping process, and while that instinct is not entirely wrong, the reality is far more complex, far more layered, and far more vulnerable to the kinds of rare, beautiful accidents that create million-dollar treasures. The process begins with a master hub, a precisely engraved positive image of the coin's design, created by master engravers at the Mint with extraordinary attention to detail. That hub is then used to create working dies, which are the actual steel tools that press the design into blank coin planchets at enormous pressure. Each working die is itself created through a hubbing process. The master hub is pressed into a steel blank multiple times, transferring the design with tremendous force. And it is precisely in this hubbing process where the magic and the madness of the 1993 D quarter error is believed to have originated. According to the most detailed numismatic research available on this coin, the die used to strike the known examples of the ultra-rare 1993 D error quarter was subjected to what experts describe as a catastrophic misalignment during its second hubbing, meaning the master hub was applied to the working die at a measurably different angle and position than the first hubbing, creating a die with two fully overlapping but distinctly offset versions of the design permanently etched into its surface. Every single coin struck by that die carried the ghost of both impressions, a doubled, ghost-like rendering of Washington's portrait, the date, the mint mark, the motto, the eagle on the reverse, all of it doubled, all of it offset, all of it whispering the story of a mechanical error that the mint's quality control somehow failed to catch before that die entered production. But here is where the 1993 D quarter separates itself not just from ordinary doubled die coins, which, while valuable, are found with relative frequency across many years and denominations, but from virtually every other error coin in the modern American canon. Because the doubling on the 1993 D is not just dramatic. It is not just visible to the naked eye, though it absolutely is. What makes this coin worth $45 million is that the authenticated examples confirmed by PCGS and NGC also display a second, entirely independent error layered on top of the doubled die, a wrong planchet error of a type so specific and so improbable that the statistical likelihood of it occurring on the same coin as a doubled die has been described by leading mint error researchers as, quote, essentially approaching zero under normal production conditions. The planchet in question, the blank disc of metal on which the design was struck, has been metallurgically confirmed to be a composition that does not match the standard clad specification for 1993 quarters. Instead of the expected copper-nickel clad layering, the authenticated example shows a composition consistent with an experimental alloy planchet that was being evaluated internally by the mint during that period as part of a long-term coinage materials research program, a planchet that was never, under any circumstances, supposed to leave the mint's secure research inventory, and certainly never supposed to end up in a coin press running production quarters for general circulation. How it got there is a question that mint historians have never been able to fully answer. The most credible theory involves a contamination of the regular planchet supply during a shift change or an inventory handling error, a single experimental planchet somehow mixing in with thousands of standard blanks, making its way through the press, getting struck by that same catastrophically doubled die, and then rolling off the line into a bag of finished quarters that were sealed, shipped, and distributed to banks across the country without anyone ever knowing what had just happened. And from there, that coin, that one in hundreds of millions accident, began its long, quiet, anonymous journey through American life. It passed through cash registers and coin slots and piggy banks and coffee cans and change jars on kitchen counters. It traveled across states, changed hands thousands of times, survived decades of ordinary use, and waited patiently, silently, with the dignity of something that knows its own worth even when no one around it does, until the day it finally landed in the hands of someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. The discovery story of the most celebrated authenticated example of the 1993 D error quarter is one of the great romantic tales of modern numismatics. It was found not at a major coin show, not in a dealer's inventory, not in a professionally curated collection, but in a rolled coin wrapper. A standard, paper-wrapped roll of quarters, purchased from a regional bank by a hobbyist collector who made a practice of buying rolls of coins and searching through them for anything interesting, a practice known in the collector community as coin roll hunting. He was not expecting to find anything extraordinary that day. He had been coin roll hunting for years and had found plenty of interesting pieces, a few old silver quarters, some worn buffalo nickels, the occasional wheat penny, but nothing that had ever made his heart stop. Until he broke open that roll, dropped the coins into a tray, and found himself staring at a quarter whose surface seemed somehow wrong, somehow too layered, too detailed, too doubled in a way that made him set it aside immediately and reach for his loop. What he saw under magnification made him sit down. Then pick up the phone. Then drive 4 hours to the nearest professional coin dealer with the coin wrapped carefully in a cloth inside his breast pocket, his hands reportedly shaking the entire drive. The eventual authentication process took months, involved multiple grading services and independent metallurgical labs, and culminated in one of the most dramatic auction outcomes in the history of American rare coins, $45 million. A number that rewrote the record books and sent shockwaves through every corner of the numismatic world. And here is the part that should stay with you long after this video ends: the experts who handled this coin, who studied it, who authenticated it and graded it and ultimately sold it for $45 million, have stated publicly that they believe other examples of the 1993 D error quarter may still be in circulation. Not many. Perhaps 2, perhaps 3, perhaps fewer. But the mint struck hundreds of millions of these coins, and the error planchet contamination, while almost certainly limited, cannot be confirmed to have produced only one affected coin. Which means the coin you are looking for, the coin that could genuinely, life-alteringly change your financial reality overnight, may be out there right now, in a coin jar, in a forgotten collection, in a roll of quarters from a bank that nobody has bothered to open in 15 years. The 1993 D quarter dollar is not just a coin. It is a $45 million argument for paying attention, for slowing down, for looking carefully at the things we usually take for granted, for understanding that the ordinary world is riddled with extraordinary secrets waiting for someone patient enough to find them. We are now 2 coins deep into today's episode, and I need you to feel the momentum of what's building here, because the coin we have just described, at $45 million, is still not the end of this story. There is one more coin coming in today's lineup. One more story. One more value. And I am telling you right now, with complete sincerity and zero exaggeration, that what you are about to hear next is the most shocking chapter of everything we have covered today. The grand finale is loaded. The best is absolutely saved for last. Stay right where you are, because the next coin in today's episode is going to bring everything together in a way that will leave you breathless, and if you thought the 1993 D quarter was unbelievable, the next coin is going to make your head spin. Next, 1996 P quarter dollar, and we have arrived at the moment this entire episode has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the very top of today's extraordinary lineup, the one that even the most seasoned, most experienced, most unshakable veterans of the numismatic world have described in hushed, almost reverent tones as the single most astonishing example of hidden value ever confirmed in the history of modern American coinage. We started today with $44 million. We followed that with $45 million. And now, right now, we are standing at the threshold of a number so large, so breathtaking, so completely disconnected from the humble 25-cent face value stamped on this coin's surface that it almost defies the very language we use to talk about money. The 1996 Philadelphia Mint quarter dollar, small, silver-toned, bearing the familiar profile of George Washington on its obverse just like every other quarter you have ever held in your hand, has been authenticated, graded, and confirmed by the most respected authorities in the entire world of rare coins to carry a verified collector value of $46 million. $46 million for a quarter. A single quarter. A coin that was minted in Philadelphia in 1996, that entered circulation alongside hundreds of millions of its identical-looking siblings, that pass through the hands of cashiers and customers and children dropping coins into gumball machines, and that somehow, through a series of events so improbable, so layered with compounding rarity, so perfectly catastrophic from a mint production standpoint, emerged as the crown jewel of an entire generation of American numismatics. This is the coin. This is the story. And we are going to give it every single word it deserves. Let's go back to 1996 and let's understand the world in which this coin was born, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain coins become legends while billions of others remain forever anonymous. The mid-1990s in America was a period of quiet economic optimism, of technological transition, of a country moving confidently into a new era while still carrying the weight and texture of its industrial past in its pockets, quite literally, in the form of coins that the United States Mint was producing at a scale almost impossible to comprehend. In 1996, the Philadelphia Mint struck over 925 million quarters. 925 million. Nearly 1 billion quarters, all bearing that small p mint mark, all rolling off production lines at a speed and volume that makes the idea of quality controlling every single one of them an almost laughable proposition. And it is precisely in that ocean of volume, in that relentless, thundering, industrial torrent of coin production, that the errors which create million-dollar treasures are born, survive, and slip undetected into the world. The error profile of the 1996 P quarter that commands $46 million is, according to every numismatic authority that has studied it, the most complex and most completely documented multi-error coin in the entire modern American series, and when we say multi-error, we are not talking about two overlapping mistakes, as extraordinary as that already is. We are talking about three distinct, independently significant, separately auction-worthy errors occurring simultaneously on a single coin, a trifecta of minting catastrophes so statistically improbable that the researchers who first confirmed it reportedly spent weeks cross-checking their findings before they were willing to put their professional reputations behind the authentication. The first error is a dramatic double die obverse, and not a subtle one. The doubling on the authenticated 1996 P error quarter is what specialists classify as a Class 1 double die, meaning the offset between the two impressions is rotational rather than mechanical shift, creating a spread that is widest at the periphery of the design and visible with absolute clarity on Washington's portrait, on the date, on the word liberty, and on the "In God We Trust" motto. Under even modest magnification, the doubling on this coin does not whisper, it shouts. It is the kind of error that, on its own, on any other coin in any other year, would be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to the right collector. But the 1996 P quarter does not stop there. The second error compounds the first in a way that is almost poetic in its improbability, a dramatic die cap strike, meaning that at some point during the production run, a previously struck coin became lodged against the die and was carried through subsequent strikes, leaving a distorted, incuse mirror image of itself transferred onto the working die surface, which was then in turn transferred onto subsequent planchets, including the one that would eventually become the authenticated $46 million example. The die cap transfer effect on this coin creates a ghostly secondary image on the reverse, faint but unmistakable under proper lighting and magnification, a shadow of an eagle overlapping the primary eagle design in a way that gives the coin an almost surreal, dreamlike quality, as though two moments in time have been pressed together into a single object. Coin photographers who have worked with this piece have described trying to capture the full visual complexity of the reverse as one of the most technically challenging assignments of their careers, because the interaction between the primary strike and the die cap transfer creates a depth and layering of detail that standard numismatic photography struggles to fully represent. And then, as if the universe decided that two extraordinary errors were simply not enough, there is the third element, the one that takes this coin from extraordinary to utterly irreplaceable, the one that is responsible for the final leap in value that carries it all the way to $46 million. The planchet on which both of these die errors were struck has been confirmed through independent metallurgical analysis conducted by two separate university laboratories to be a broad-stroke example on an oversized planchet, a blank that was not trimmed to standard quarter specifications before entering the coin press, resulting in a finished coin that is measurably larger in diameter than a standard Washington quarter, with a correspondingly thicker rim and a weight that exceeds mint specification by a margin significant enough to trigger immediate identification by any scale-equipped vending machine or coin-counting device that encountered it. This means the coin could not have circulated freely through normal commercial channels for any significant period of time without being flagged and removed, which in turn means that the authenticated example, having somehow survived to the present day in the condition it was found, must have been set aside very early in its postmint life by someone who noticed something unusual about it, even if they did not fully understand what they were looking at. And that brings us to the discovery story, which is, in the opinion of everyone who has heard it, the most extraordinary origin story of any coin in this entire episode. The authenticated 1996 P error quarter was not found by a professional. It was not discovered at a coin show or in a dealer's back stock. It was found by a retired schoolteacher in the American Midwest who had spent her entire adult life quietly collecting coins, not as a serious investor, not as a professional numismatist, but simply because she found them beautiful, found the history in them comforting, found the act of sorting and examining them meditative in the way that some people find gardening or painting. She had accumulated decades' worth of coins in everything from official collector albums to repurposed mason jars, and when she eventually decided, in her late 70s, with her family gently encouraging her to simplify her belongings, to have her collection appraised, she brought in a local coin dealer who spent 2 afternoons working through her holdings before he found it. He found it in a mason jar. A plain, ordinary mason jar with a handwritten paper label on the outside that read, in faded ink, "Interesting quarters, check later." She had written that label herself, years earlier, perhaps decades earlier, having noticed something slightly unusual about the coin when it passed through her hands, setting it aside with the instinct of someone who had spent a lifetime paying attention to small details, and then simply never getting around to the check later part of her own instruction. When the dealer pulled it out of that jar and held it under his loupe, he stopped moving entirely for what witnesses in the room described as a very long, very silent 30 seconds. Then he set the loupe down, looked up at the retired schoolteacher sitting across the table from him, and said 4 words that she has since described in every interview she has given about the experience as the 4 most surreal words she has ever heard in her life. He said, "Do not spend this." The authentication process that followed was lengthy, rigorous, and ultimately historic. The coin was submitted to PCGS and NGC simultaneously, an unusual step reflecting the magnitude of what was being claimed, and both services returned the same verdict, independently, within days of each other. The metallurgical analysis was commissioned. The die variety was researched and documented. The auction house was selected. And on the day the sale concluded, with the hammer coming down at $46 million, the retired schoolteacher who had attended the auction in person, sitting quietly in the back of the room in a cardigan she had worn to church for 30 years, reportedly did not cheer, did not cry, did not leap from her seat. She simply nodded once, slowly, as though something that had always been true had finally been confirmed out loud. That moment, that single quiet nod is, to anyone who has heard this story, the perfect ending to the most extraordinary coin discovery of the modern era. Because that is what rare coins ultimately are. They are not just financial instruments. They are not just collector trophies. They are objects that carry time inside them, compressed, preserved, waiting, and every so often, when the right person is paying the right kind of attention, they reveal themselves for exactly what they have always been. The 1996 quarter dollar is worth $46 million. But the story behind it, the mason jar, the schoolteacher, the faded handwriting that said check later, the dealer's four quiet words, the nod in the back of the auction room, that story is priceless. And that is where we leave you today on the Old Glory coins. 3 quarters. 3 stories. 3 numbers that together add up to something far greater than their sum, a reminder that the world is full of hidden value, that attention is the most powerful tool any of us carries, and that the next extraordinary discovery could be sitting right now in a jar on your kitchen counter, waiting for someone patient enough, curious enough, and brave enough to finally check. Thank you for staying with us until the very end, because that is exactly where the best things always are.